In war, there are two kinds of secrets: the secrets you know and the secrets you would kill to possess. In 1968, at the height of the Cold War, one of the Soviet Union's most valuable and deadly secrets vanished without a trace. It wasn't a spy, it wasn't a document, it was a Golf II class ballistic missile submarine, designation K-129. One moment, it was silently patrolling the abyss of the Pacific Ocean, a ghost armed with 3 nuclear warheads, each one powerful enough to incinerate an American city. The next moment, there was only silence. For the Soviet Navy, it was a catastrophe and a terrifying mystery. A submarine doesn't just disappear. Frantically, they launched a massive secret search operation. Dozens of ships and aircraft scoured a vast swath of the Pacific. But they found nothing, not a single piece of wreckage, not an oil slick, not a trace. After weeks of fruitless searching, the Kremlin was forced to accept the unthinkable. One of their nuclear-armed hunters had become the hunted, swallowed by the very ocean it was meant to command. The Soviets had lost their ghost. But what the Soviets didn't know was that someone else was listening. Thousands of miles away, in top-secret American naval intelligence facilities, analysts were poring over acoustic data from the SOSUS network, a secret underwater web of hydrophones laid across the ocean floor designed for one purpose: to track Soviet submarines. And they had heard something. On March 8, 1968, the tapes recorded a series of faint, catastrophic acoustic events from a remote location in the North Pacific. A muffled bang, the shriek of collapsing metal, the sickening sound of a submarine hull imploding under unimaginable pressure. The Americans didn't know exactly what had happened. Was it an internal explosion? A collision? But they knew one thing the Soviets didn't. They knew where it happened. Using a revolutionary method of acoustic triangulation, they pinpointed the location of the wreckage to a tiny search area, a staggering 16,000 feet below the surface, nearly 3 miles down. For the men in the Pentagon and at CIA headquarters in Langley, Virginia, this was the intelligence opportunity of a lifetime. Lying on the ocean floor was a Soviet nuclear submarine, an intact treasure trove of secrets, its code books, its communication systems, its sonar technology, its nuclear missile guidance systems, and most tantalizing of all, its nuclear warheads. To get their hands on that submarine would be like capturing the enemy's king, queen, and entire castle in a single move. It could change the balance of the Cold War overnight. But there was one small problem. The submarine was 3 miles down. At that depth, the pressure is over 7,000 pounds per square inch. It is a place of eternal darkness, colder than ice, and more alien than the surface of the moon. No navy in the world had the technology to lift a multi-thousand-ton object from such a depth. It was impossible. It was science fiction, and so the CIA was presented with a challenge that sounded like a fantasy. They were told, "We know where it is. Go get it." The mission was given a code name that was as audacious as the plan itself: Project Azorian. The goal was simple to state and impossible to execute. Build a machine that has never been imagined, to retrieve an object that was never meant to be found, from a place that was never meant to be reached, and do it all in complete secrecy, right under the noses of the entire Soviet fleet, who were still searching for their lost submarine hundreds of miles away. The task fell to a small, shadowy group of engineers and intelligence officers. They knew that building a recovery ship in a government shipyard would raise too many questions. They needed a cover story, a perfect bulletproof lie that would explain why a massive, strange-looking ship was being built, and why it would be sitting for months in the middle of the Pacific Ocean in the exact same spot. The lie they came up with was a work of genius. They wouldn't build a military ship. They would build a mining vessel. They would tell the world that they were embarking on a pioneering commercial venture to mine precious manganese nodules from the deep ocean floor. To make the lie believable, they needed a billionaire visionary, a man eccentric enough and rich enough to fund such a crazy scheme. And they found the perfect candidate, the most famous and reclusive billionaire in the world, Howard Hughes. Hughes, with his reputation for secret projects and his existing government contracts, was the perfect front. His company, Hughes Tool Company, would officially build the ship. The world was told that Howard Hughes was about to revolutionize deep-sea mining. But in the secret corridors of the CIA, the engineers began designing a machine that had nothing to do with mining. They were designing a monster, a ship that would carry, hidden in its belly, the largest and most sophisticated grappling hook ever conceived by man. They were building a deep-sea claw designed for one purpose and one purpose only: to pluck a nuclear submarine from its watery grave. The hunt for the ghost had begun. The lie was perfect. The world believed Howard Hughes was about to mine the ocean floor. Now, the CIA just had to do the impossible: secretly build a ship that could actually pull it off. The project was handed to the CIA's Directorate of Science and Technology, the same secretive department behind the U-2 spy plane and the SR-71 Blackbird. Their engineers were the modern-day Da Vinci's of the clandestine world, and Project Azorian would be their masterpiece. The ship they designed was unlike anything ever seen. It would be over 600 feet long, a giant, but its true secrets were hidden from view. The ship, later named the Hughes Glomar Explorer, was designed with a massive hollowed-out section in its belly, a moon pool, which could be opened to the ocean below. This cavernous internal dock, hidden beneath the waterline, was large enough to hold the entire captured submarine, allowing it to be lifted and concealed without ever breaking the surface and being spotted by Soviet spy satellites. But the heart of the monster was the machine that would do the actual lifting. It wasn't a simple hook. It was a colossal, multi-fingered mechanical claw, officially called the capture vehicle, but known to its creators simply as Clementine. This claw, the size of a building, would be attached to the end of a 3-mile-long steel pipe string, the strongest ever made. The entire operation would be a deep-sea version of a carnival claw game, but on a mind-boggling scale. The engineering challenges were terrifying. The pipe string alone would weigh millions of pounds. It had to be strong enough to lift the waterlogged 2,000-ton submarine, yet flexible enough not to snap under the immense stresses of deep ocean currents. The claw had to be sophisticated enough to gently but firmly grasp the broken submarine's hull, which was as fragile as an eggshell after its implosion, without breaking it apart. And the ship itself needed a revolutionary system to stay perfectly stationary above the target, 3 miles below. They invented what is now known as dynamic positioning, a computer-controlled system of powerful thrusters that could hold the massive ship in place against wind and waves with a precision of just a few feet. They were inventing entirely new fields of technology just for this one mission. While the Glomar Explorer was being built in a shipyard in Pennsylvania, another secret vessel was constructed in San Diego. This was the Hughes Mining Barge, or HMB-1. On the surface, it was a simple transport barge. In reality, it was a submersible stealth dock. Its roof could retract, and the entire barge could be flooded, allowing it to sink beneath the waves. This was how they would secretly transfer the massive claw Clementine into the Glomar Explorer's moon pool, away from the prying eyes of spy satellites. The entire operation was a ballet of deception and engineering genius. Every component was built by different contractors, none of whom knew the true purpose of what they were making. The men working on the giant claw were told it was for a deep-sea mining rig. The crew being hired to man the Glomar Explorer were told they were going on a top-secret commercial venture for Howard Hughes. They had to sign extensive non-disclosure agreements. The CIA even planted fake stories in newspapers and scientific journals about the bright future of manganese nodule mining, all to build the credibility of their cover story. By 1974, after years of construction and billions of dollars spent, the monster was ready. The Glomar Explorer was a true marvel, a ship that was decades ahead of its time. It sailed from the East Coast, around South America, and up to its secret rendezvous point off the coast of California. There, under the cover of darkness, it met the HMB-1 barge. In a series of complex, never-before-attempted maneuvers, the barge's roof retracted, it was flooded, and the giant claw Clementine was floated out and secretly installed into the ship's hidden moon pool. No one saw a thing. The stage was set. In the summer of 1974, the Hughes Glomar Explorer set sail from Long Beach, California. Its official destination, a newly discovered, incredibly rich field of manganese nodules in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. Its real destination, a single secret set of coordinates. Point N for Nectar, the watery grave of the Soviet submarine K-129. But the Soviets were not stupid. They had been watching the construction of this strange ship for years. They were suspicious. As the Glomar Explorer steamed towards its destination, Soviet intelligence ships and spy trawlers began to shadow it. They wanted to see what Howard Hughes's mysterious new toy was really up to. The CIA knew they were being watched. The crew was instructed to act normal, to perform mining operations. But deep inside the ship, another team, the secret CIA recovery team, was preparing for the real mission. The moment they reached Point Nectar, they would open the moon pool doors, and the world's largest, most secret fishing expedition would begin. The question was, would they be able to pull it off before the Soviets figured out what they were really fishing for? On July 4th, 1974, the Hughes Glomar Explorer arrived at Point Nectar. For the Soviet spy ship shadowing them from a few miles away, it looked like the beginning of a long, boring mining operation. But inside the Glomar, the mood was electric. The moment they were in position, the captain gave the order. Deep within the hull of the ship, giant hydraulic doors began to slide open, revealing the dark, churning waters of the moon pool. The CIA's secret recovery team took over. The mission was a go. The process was agonizingly slow. Section by section, the crew began to lower the 3-mile-long pipe string down into the abyss. Each 60-foot section of pipe had to be meticulously connected and lowered, a process that was repeated hundreds of times. Day after day, the pipe string descended deeper into the blackness, carrying the colossal mechanical claw Clementine at its end. For the CIA operatives, it was a week of unbearable tension. They were a sitting duck. Every minute they spent on site increased the risk of the Soviets getting suspicious and moving in for a closer look. The crew worked around the clock. 8 days after arriving, the claw finally reached the bottom. On the screens in the control room, the fuzzy black and white images from Clementine's deep-sea cameras appeared. And there it was, the ghost, the mangled, broken wreck of the K-129 lying silently in the silt, exactly where their intelligence had said it would be. It was a chilling, triumphant moment. They had found it. Now came the most delicate part of the entire operation. The operators in the control room, like surgeons performing a remote operation, began to maneuver the giant claw. Using joysticks, they guided Clementine over the wreck. The plan was to position its massive tines underneath the submarine's hull and lift the entire forward section of the vessel. For hours, they nudged and positioned the claw, millimeter by millimeter. Any sudden movement could cause the fragile hull to disintegrate. Finally, the claw was in position. The order was given. Slowly, the hydraulic tines began to close around the submarine, digging into the mud and cradling the wreck. On the ship above, the crew felt a shudder as the full weight of the submarine was transferred to the pipe string. They had it. They had actually captured a Soviet nuclear submarine. The lifting began. Winches the size of houses started the slow, painstaking process of pulling the 3-mile-long pipe string back up to the surface. Inch by inch, foot by foot, the precious cargo was being raised from its watery grave. Inside the control room, the mood was jubilant. It was working. The impossible was happening. But then, disaster struck. About a third of the way up, over a mile below the surface, the sonar operators and engineers noticed a series of terrifying acoustic events. On the monitors, they saw a cascade of stress warnings. Something was wrong. And then, on the grainy video feed from the claw's cameras, they watched in horror. Several of the giant mechanical tines on Clementine, under the immense, unforeseen stress, suddenly buckled and broke. The submarine, held precariously in the damaged claw, began to shift. For a moment, it held, and then, in a slow-motion nightmare, the main section of the wreck, the aft 2/3 of the submarine, tore away from the part held by the claw. It slipped through the broken fingers of Clementine and began its long final journey back down into the abyss. In the control room, there was a stunned, horrified silence. Years of work, billions of dollars, all gone in a matter of seconds. They had lost the most valuable part of the prize. The section containing the missile silos, the code room, and the engine room was gone forever. It was a catastrophic failure, but it was not a complete failure. The claw was still holding on to something. The forward 38-foot section of the submarine, it was a much smaller piece than they had hoped for, but it was still a piece. It contained the torpedo room and, crucially, 2 nuclear-tipped torpedoes. And most importantly, it contained the bodies of some of the deceased Soviet sailors. The crew had no choice but to continue. Heartbroken but determined, they continued the slow lift. Finally, after days of agonizing ascent, the mangled forward section of the K-129, held in the broken grasp of Clementine, emerged from the depths into the hidden moon pool of the Glomar Explorer. The doors of the moon pool were sealed. The prize, or what was left of it, was inside. They had something, but their mission wasn't over. They still had to give their prize a proper burial. In the final part, the CIA performs a secret burial at sea for the recovered Soviet sailors, an act of respect that would remain a secret for decades. But the secret of Project Azorian itself is about to be blown wide open, not by the KGB, but by a burglary in Los Angeles, leading to one of the most bizarre and consequential leaks in American history. Inside the sealed moon pool of the Glomar Explorer, hidden from the world, the CIA was in possession of a tomb. The forward section of the K-129 was more than just a piece of enemy technology. It was the final resting place for at least 6 Soviet sailors. The CIA operatives, men who had spent their careers fighting the Soviet Union, now faced a profound moral duty. They were not just salvagers, they were custodians of the dead. In a moment that stands as one of the most remarkable and secret acts of the Cold War, the director of the CIA, William Colby, made a decision. They would give the dead sailors a proper burial, a secret burial at sea, with full military honors. A team was assembled. Working in the chilling, claustrophobic confines of the moon pool, they carefully recovered the bodies of the 6 Soviet crewmen. The remains were placed in a specially prepared weighted steel casket. A Soviet flag was draped over it, a flag they had brought for exactly this purpose. On September 4th, 1974, the crew of the Glomar Explorer assembled on the deck. The ship's chaplain, holding a prayer book translated into Russian, conducted a formal burial service. The Soviet and American national anthems were played over the ship's loudspeakers. The captain delivered a eulogy, honoring the dead sailors not as enemies, but as fellow men of the sea. And then, as the sun set over the Pacific, the heavy steel casket was committed to the deep. It was an extraordinary act of decency and respect, performed in complete secrecy by one sworn enemy for another in the middle of their most audacious intelligence operation. The CIA even filmed the entire ceremony, creating a record they intended to one day give to the Soviet government as a gesture of goodwill. With the burial complete, the Glomar Explorer turned for home, its mission a partial success, its secret still safe. The recovered section of the submarine was analyzed, yielding some valuable intelligence on Soviet metallurgy and nuclear torpedo design. But the grand prize, the nuclear missiles and code books, lay forever lost on the ocean floor. Project Azorian was over, or so they thought. The secret of Project Azorian was about to be blown wide open, not by a KGB mole or a spy satellite, but by a completely unrelated, almost comical event, a simple burglary. Months earlier, in June 1974, the Los Angeles office of the Summa Corporation, one of Howard Hughes's companies, had been burglarized. The thieves, looking for cash or jewels, stole a number of file boxes. What they didn't know was that one of those boxes contained a secret memo detailing the true purpose of the Glomar Explorer and its connection to the CIA. The thieves, realizing they had stumbled upon something huge, tried to ransom the documents. The story eventually found its way to a reporter for the Los Angeles Times, who began connecting the dots. The CIA, learning of the impending leak, went into panic mode. The director, William Colby, personally called the editors of major newspapers, including the Los Angeles Times and the New York Times, and begged them to kill the story. He invoked national security, arguing that publishing the story would not only compromise a vital intelligence operation, but could also provoke a major international incident with the Soviet Union. For a time, the press agreed. The story was held. It was one of the last times in American history that the government was able to hold back a major story on the grounds of national security alone. But secrets in Washington have a short shelf life. In February 1975, the dam broke. Columnist Jack Anderson, who was not part of the original agreement, broke the story on national radio. The Los Angeles Times and the New York Times, feeling their agreement was now void, published their own detailed accounts. The story of Project Azorian, the CIA, Howard Hughes, and the secret mission to steal a Soviet submarine exploded into the public consciousness. The public reaction was a mixture of outrage at the deception and sheer, unadulterated awe at the audacity and technological brilliance of the operation. The story was so outlandish, so much like a spy novel, that it became a legend. It was the birth of the Glomar response, the now famous phrase used by intelligence agencies when they can neither confirm nor deny the existence of certain information. Years later, in 1992, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, the CIA finally shared the story with the new Russian government. The director of the CIA, Robert Gates, traveled to Moscow and presented President Boris Yeltsin with the film of the secret burial ceremony they had conducted nearly 2 decades earlier. For the families of the lost sailors of the K-129, it was the first time they learned the true fate of their loved ones. It was a final, poignant closing of the book on one of the Cold War's most incredible and secret chapters. Project Azorian was, in many ways, a failure. It failed to recover the main prize, but it remains one of the most astounding feats of engineering and espionage ever attempted. It is a story of ingenuity, audacity, and a surprising hidden moment of humanity in the heart of the Cold War's darkest depths. What do you think? Was Project Azorian a brilliant success or a spectacular failure? And does the secret burial ceremony change your view of the CIA and the nature of the Cold War? Let us know in the comments.